First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler, as always. Thanks for joining us. We do appreciate it. We are live streaming here from the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom, as we do every weekday, covering a wide range of topics. Today, though, we are talking about a first-of-its-kind study here in the United States that happened to take place in Portland. And we're talking about noise levels, noise pollution, something that we're all aware of that term, and noise pollution being probably thought of as a nuisance for a lot of people, but in fact, studies show that it is actually unhealthy for you. And certain areas of the city, and when we're talking about Portland, but other cities as well, are more affected by it than others. And there's a whole lot to get into with this and to understand what's going on. To do so, we are joined now by Matt Bozigar from OSU College of Health. And Matt, thank you very much for being here with us today. I saw this study come through. I was just like, that's really interesting. I never really thought about that before. I live in the city of Portland. There's always noise going on to where I'm just used to it, but I've never thought about it as a health side effect or something that could affect your health. And so to start off, would you mind just telling us, how this study came about and what really prompted it?
Sure. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on and to talk a little bit about our work. I think you said it. So noise is a health hazard, and I just think a lot of people in the U.S. in particular just don't really appreciate that, or even know that. So, it's not necessarily like a loud noise, like any given loud noise is going to, cause like a heart attack or something like that. It might, but we're talking more about like long-term exposure to noise at different levels and frequencies. And so part of the goal of this study was to just try to understand in a city, and it happened to be Portland, my hometown. We just wanted to see how the noise patterns in the city manifest, across the city, like spatially, but also over time. So is there pulsing of noise, like kind of rapid noise fluctuations, and what's nighttime noise like, and just trying to understand who's exposed to what types of noise in a city, a medium large kind of size city.
And there's so many questions there just of understanding that side of it. I guess one of them though being this exposure to noise and then equating it to someone's health. So what are some of the things that exposure to noise can do to someone's health?
Right. So maybe the biggest is disturbing sleep. So whether you're aware of it or not, noise can do what's called an arousal or a micro arousal. Arousal would be like taking you out of sleep completely, and that you would be conscious of. But the micro arousals are a more insidious thing. And noise can cause those as well, because those are the types of arousals that maybe take you from a deeper sleep stage to something lighter. And you're probably never conscious of those things happening. And so sleep disruption is a major risk factor for all sorts of chronic diseases, cardiovascular disease, it can lead to hypertension, and many other things. So we're very interested in how noise may be disrupting sleep on a population scale. And the other is stress. So we think a lot about the stress that noise can cause, and especially chronic stress. So if you're repeatedly exposed to something, and whether it's transportation noise, road noise, something like that, or something else. In one way, you kind of get habitualized to it. But on the other side, there's still an objective component that it can affect your health, whether or not you experience it so frequently that it just seems normal to you. It still can be affecting your kind of hormonal levels and things like that. So those are both risk factors for a lot of different types of diseases.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's so true. Even if you do think that you're used to it, it still could be affecting you. So let's talk about this. For the study in Portland itself, what did you find were some of the causes, or maybe the locations where a lot of this noise pollution was happening?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny because in being involved in this research, there's been plenty of times where people have been like, well, yeah, duh, of course that. So I'm going to give you the yeah, duh answer is like in the city, the noisiest places were nearest the busiest roads. Okay, so that's like maybe intuitive. Um, but what's less intuitive is, yeah, and you can see it there exactly. So you see the major roads, you see the freeways, you see, I-84, I-5, I-205 really popping out. And that's because vehicles at high speed generate the most noise. But what was less known is off the main roads as you kind of move away. What are noise exposures like in the residential parts of the city? So where people actually are sleeping at night, for example, in their homes. So yeah, so that was kind of the rationale there.
Yeah, and so you see where those things are happening, and then as far as the causes, so you mentioned cars, but is transportation really one of the biggest causes of noise pollution in the city?
Yeah, great question. We've done some additional analyses. They weren't in this published work, but we hope to publish those results soon. Just trying to identify the sources at each of the sites that we measured noise at, and the dominant sources for the vast majority of these sites preliminarily was road or vehicle related traffic. So that's really the predominant noise source in the city. But interestingly, we also kind of observed at some of the quieter sites. So we measured noise in 10 or 12 Portland parks. And that was designed to help us really understand the background levels of noise, like when there's really not that many noise sources present, what's it like in terms of noise in the middle of a park, say? But in some of those quietest areas, and those were the quieter areas because they tended to be away from the roads, we also heard aircraft noise pretty frequently, not at a super high level, but definitely noticeable above background level. And so this study wasn't really geared towards that to identify aircraft noise exposures in the city, but I think we learned throughout the study that that's another significant noise source that we may need to study more in the future.
Interesting. Yeah, it's something along those lines. Yeah, I didn't even think about that when thinking about this study either, as far as air traffic. And I guess if you live near the airport, that would probably be a much more predominant thing.
Yeah.
Taking a look here, I do have a couple of examples, so I'm going to pull these up, and this does have sound for everybody. So tell us what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so this is one of the sites, obviously on a busy road. I believe this is Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in North Portland. Yep, and you can see there's trucks going by, right? And if you can hear that, they generate quite a bit of noise. And okay, we're also next to a solid structure here, so that's going to reflect some of the noise and make it kind of amplify a bit. So there's the sources of noise in the cars, but there's also that interaction with the built environment around the vehicles and how the roads are oriented in the urban fabric of the city. So we're trying to understand what's it like being like really close to a busy road with this site.
Oh, sorry, I was just muted myself so I wasn't interfering with the noise. So I was going to say, though, I recognize exactly where this is. But yeah, I didn't think about that, too, the noise reflection off of the buildings as well being a factor in that.
Yeah. Right. So that was one thing that we really wanted to try to capture. Most noise research that's done for highway purposes, like maybe for designing noise barriers and things, tends to use a very simplified setting, if you will, in trying to determine how to properly size a noise wall or something like that. But there's less known about kind of the dynamics of these reflections and refraction, diffraction, all the dynamics that a sound wave can undergo within a city. And so there's that has been a gap that's been lacking in knowledge on noise.
Yeah, this is really giving me a whole different way to look at it now when I'm walking around my neighborhood. I also have this example here too, just of, as you mentioned, the parks. Here we are, I believe it's Mount Tabor is where you're at right here. And yeah, definitely a different level of noise when you're here.
Yeah, right. And hopefully the viewers can hear that. You notice it right away that you're very much it looks different, the environment, right? So there's a correlation between what you see and what you hear. You don't see sources of noise, and they're in the background, but that's something that you notice at a site like this, which is one of our quieter sites in Mount Tabor Park, where the noise sources are far away, and consequently, there's just less of the transportation noise exposure reaching a place like this, um, for the most part.
Yeah, you still can hear it. And I don't know if people can hear it at home. You may need to turn up your speakers, but trust me, you can still hear some of that background city traffic noise there. Certainly a lot less than you could in that other one by
Right.
far.
And yeah, I just wanted to say, even at Mount Tabor, you could hear the roar of the highway. So you could hear the roar of I-205, which was not too far away. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can still hear that in there. Well, given, with this study now here, Portland, is this something that you think city planners can go about maybe mitigating some of that noise? Are there steps that could be taken to help cut down on some of that pollution?
Yeah, I think we'd want to have any like health effects be driving that conversation, but there's enough evidence coming out of Europe that we can probably say with a fair amount of certainty that yes, these noisier places in the city are harmful to health. I think that is something we need to think about down the road. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Yeah.
Yeah, as far as how to do that. Now, for the studies in Europe, have they taken any measures, since it sounds like they've been studying this a lot longer or more in depth at the very least? Have they taken
Yeah.
any steps on that along those lines?
Yeah, so there's been several cities in Europe that have in different countries that have uh, installed like quieter pavements. So and kind of denoted quiet areas. So areas without vehicles, more walking streets, things like that. In Paris, there was a recent law and a technology to go along with it to um, essentially fine people for having engines that are too loud. So they have a whole system with a microphone and a camera, and can isolate, the loud engines in the city. Um, and it's been shown, I think, in some in a video, a research kind of expose, that how a single like motorcycle in Paris at night driving through the city could in theory, wake up thousands of people, and not to mention those micro arousals too. Um, but I want to emphasize too that Portland is not necessarily like an outlier in terms of noise. In fact, we don't even know relative to other cities where Portland stands because we don't know the noise levels in those other cities. So it's possible that Portland's even on maybe the lower end of the spectrum of overall noise. You would expect maybe some of the bigger cities, the denser cities, maybe those on the eastern seaboard, to potentially have higher noise levels even than Portland. So still don't know.
Yeah, that would make sense. So for now that we have this study and this information is getting out there for people to take a look at it and really understand it a little bit more, do you anticipate some more studies for these other cities just to have this start being part of planning for cities, at least understanding where their noise is coming from?
We hope so. Yeah, we hope that's the case. I don't know of a whole lot going on right now, but the game changer for this type of research, I think, lately has been these new kind of lower cost devices that have digital microphones that are much cheaper and can run on battery power, which some of the best instrumentation for measuring noise um, like doesn't have. So that's a new advantage that I think we took advantage of it here in Portland, but I think it could be taken advantage of in other cities as well, to really measure noise 24 hours a day and include like the nighttime periods, which are very important for health.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really, really interesting stuff, just understanding that landscape. We have so many other things that we pay attention to, but understanding the noise levels. And as you mentioned, some of those digital microphones are a lot easier to come by now, so that it's cheaper. Well, for everybody out there who wants to learn more about this study and just follow along with what you've come up with here, what's the best place for them to do so?
Gosh, well, we don't have a federal agency managing noise anymore, so that would have been a go-to. That was kind of dissolved in maybe the 80s or so. I think the World Health Organization is going to be a great, one-stop shop for just understanding how noise affects health and its relative importance in terms of other things, right? So you mentioned it, like the things that we think about as being adversely affecting our health from the environment, things like lead, things like chemicals, even radon, things like that, and air pollution. Noise in Europe is associated with with more disability and death, or life of healthy years lost. For noise is the second leading environmental factor behind only air pollution. And, that's something that the WHO is saying. So I think that's, they're kind of leading the curve on this and setting the international standard. And we're hoping that federal and state and local, policies and organizations will help share that message as well, especially as the research begins to fill the gaps.
Well, Matt, thank you very much for joining us to talk about this really interesting stuff, and something that we can all now think about and visualize too, with that map that you have on there, and hear it as well. And I know I'm going to be thinking about this later on today when I'm walking around my neighborhood, of where things are echoing off of, and just realizing what's going on around you. Well, thank you very much for joining us here on Fox 12 Now. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And for everybody watching, we're going to take a break. Thank you for joining us again. This is Fox 12 Now. We live stream here out of the newsroom every weekday, starting at 1, sometimes earlier at 11 a.m. We did a whole lot of coverage on the tsunami earlier today, so you can check that out on the Fox 12 Oregon app or wherever you're finding us. That is a great place to watch this. Coming up at 1:30 p.m., we're going to talk about the Epicenter Summit that happened at Nike for women's sports, and Portland being the epicenter for that. So there's some great panelists that we'll have on for that segment. Coming up at 1:30, if there's breaking news, we'll have that as well. Between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m., this is the place to go. But taking a break right now. I'll talk to you in about 10 minutes or so. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.